Hi, and welcome to the Cultural Anthropology and Development Sociology presentation. My name is Tino, I'm a third-year student, and I will walk you through everything that you really need to know to understand the studies. So to start with, we will of course talk about, what is CADS about, what you will actually learn. Then we will talk about, how we do research, how we actually understand, what we try to understand. And then we'll finish with looking at what CADS, what studying this bachelor can really prepare you for. So let's get started. So then, what is cultural anthropology and development sociology actually about? So to start with, we basically look into people, what brings us together, but also what differentiates us. So for instance, our behaviors, our habits, and our beliefs. All these aspects are not determined by nature, so like our biology, but rather by culture and by all these aspects that surround us in our environment, like the people around us. So then culture is incredibly key to understanding anthropology. It's our big tool to try to understand the world. And to give a simple definition, although it's so much more, it's basically the aspects of being human and the ways of looking at the world that are made by, changed by, and transmitted by humans. So of course, as you can imagine, this is not something that people just look at alone by themselves, but rather something done with other people, in groups of people. So that's why anthropologists often studies groups of people together. And one of our big differences with psychology is this, that we don't just study individuals in a lab in that kind of setting, but rather we try to study daily life, because we believe that that is where culture is created. That is what you really see people interact with each other and how they actually live their lives. But then how do we study this, right? It's a bit hard, but we have a lot of methods. The main characteristic one is field work, which is basically working in the field, as it sounds. And it's about, again, with the example of, in contrast to psychologists just staying in the lab, we try to really go to what we want to study, well, to where the people that we want to study are in. So just not observing from like our little tower or our car just from the distance, but really trying to approach people. And I will talk a bit more about the methods for this later, but something also crucial for this is sometimes we have to study maybe the economy of a place, or the historical background of a place, the environment, or the political developments, because all these things helps us understand the circumstances that these people are in and their struggles. And it's what we call a holistic approach. To me, it's basically like being able to take a step back so that you can have a better overview of what's going on, of what really is affecting everything that you see in front of you. And then, this is really cool, but why also development sociology, right? It's basically because cultural anthropology and development sociology, they complement each other incredibly. Because cultural anthropology is about studying groups of people, but then development sociology is about studying society, studying larger groups of people. So in the end, they're just an incredible tool to help each other really understand what we want to really understand, people. So for instance, in our first year, I remember we read a book on Moroccan households in a small town. And for this, we both looked at, how they lived in that town, their customs, their culture, and what they actually did, how these people felt about how life was changing, but also at the cities, at what was happening in Morocco in general, at what the influences of maybe capitalist policies or something. All these things, how they interact with each other and perhaps make people in the town want to migrate to the city for different opportunities, or helps us understand what is missing in the city, in the town. So for this, to talk more about specific methods, the most characteristic ones of anthropology, especially from fieldwork, are interviewing, survey making, which is super important to learn how to do well, you will see, map making, townscaping, and data analyzing, of course. And then my favorite one is participant observation, which is basically, instead of observing from the outside, more like participating in what you are looking at. So for instance, on my first year, I was studying a small communal garden in Leiden, super close to the faculty, like 5 minutes away. And, I just wanted to understand it better. And so there was someone like in their garden just doing their own thing. And I was like, hey, can I help you out? to understand better why you're here and talk a bit with you. She was like, oh yeah, sure. So she just taught me how to, like use a shovel and stuff and just dig stuff out of her garden and do her work, which was in the end super cool. And the best way to really understand what people are doing, because if you just look from far away, it's easy to judge until you actually get there. So to give you examples of this, of what we get through these methods, what we actually learn, we will share some stories from teachers. So for instance, we have some examples from close to home, more related to the issues of diversity, with, for instance, a teacher that looks at the Dutch welfare system and how migrant families interact with it. So for instance, how they interact with the public health system or or social workers. And so and looking at race, culture, religion, and many other topics, and how they affect these conversations and interactions, and how they are changed by it, how they change after all these interactions between these such different people. Then we have another example from a teacher that looks into so many topics such as gender, embodiment, religion, culture, and movement by studying young Muslim girls that do kickboxing. So it's really cool that with all these things we can really understand in small groups such important aspects of anthropology, such as diversity, or for example, one teacher focuses on, with studying the young Muslim girls, decolonizing anthropology. Then we have other examples from far away, more focused on sustainability. So, for instance, we have a teacher that specializes on disaster anthropology, which is basically studying the ways that people try to predict and try to act upon catastrophes. So, for instance, he studies the nuclear meltdown and the tsunami that occurred in Japan in 2011. Well, we have another example of a teacher that specializes on environmental anthropology and studies forestal communities and coastal communities in the Asia-Pacific region and how they try to adapt to social and environmental change. So then, let's just now have an overview of the program. So to talk about more pragmatic things, first of all, we have 12 contact hours every week, 12 to 15. This consists of lectures and work groups, so basically hours where you get to interact with others. But then there's also a lot of self-study included in this program for you to do. This is not as super bad as it sounds. It's more like perhaps what often happens is that for most lectures, you first have to read an article before going there. And this helps you really understand what's going on, and then the teacher usually links different articles and different concepts so you can understand this better. So to summarize, it's basically we have 12 to 15 weekly contact hours, and then just time for self-study, usually with articles or assignments. Then about the people in our study, we have 24 different nationalities included, and then on our first year we have more or less 130 students. And the international to Dutch radio is 50-50, so it's really well balanced. You should also know that there's a career orientation program for you to support you since the first year to really develop the skills that you want to develop for your future jobs. Then about the language, that program is totally taught in English. So the lectures and the articles are in English. However, if you speak Dutch, you can also have your tutorials, your assignments, and your exams be done in Dutch. So that way, your English doesn't have to be amazing. You can always take the studies. And then about the topics that we focus on, there's 3 key themes. So sustainability, which focuses more through politics, economy, and our relationship with the environment to try to look into, for instance, the climate crisis. But we also look at, for instance, the divide between nature and culture and whether that actually exists, which is super interesting. And for instance, for me, when I looked into the e-prospectus and saw economy and ecology, I was like, wow, economy? Maybe I don't want to do the studies. And it became one of my favorite courses. It's incredible. So be open to perhaps themes that you're not so interested in. And then there's also diversity, which looks into gender, race, ethnicity, religion, sexuality, and all these different aspects of society that create a lot of struggles, discrimination, and how to look at equality, at how we can turn it into something. And then there's digitalization, which is about our relationship, of course, with social media, but also with the technical developments that are continuing throughout our lives and how we relate to them. There's also something important in the second year, which is that you get to choose from 2 different tracks. But we will talk more about that in a second. So in the first year, of course, we have introductory courses in anthropology and sociology, but don't worry, like they're already from the beginning mind-shattering, and since the first weeks we already make jokes about social constructs and how we don't understand anything. It's really cool, but don't worry, you understand enough. We also have quantitative and qualitative research methods to study. So qualitative are more from anthropology, and quantitative are more from sociology. And they complement each other really well, and we get to start to put them into practice in the first year. We also have a course for our academic skills, mainly our writing, to really develop. So, you know, everything that we learn from all these things, we get to share it with people. Then on the second year, you get to choose from 2 different tracks. So one that studies issues of sustainability and citizenship and power, and a second one that studies processes of digitalization and audiovisual mediation. But don't worry, if you're super interested in both, if there's courses in both that you're really interested in, you can always, on your third year, take a few courses from that one track that you didn't choose. But I'll talk more about that later. You also get to choose a course on a region of choice, but it doesn't have to be from our institute. I have a friend, for example, that already graduated that was obsessed with a Caribbean Studies course on another faculty. And then there's Fieldwork NL, which is one of our biggest courses where we put all the methods that we learned from into practice, where we really do, we start from the beginning and we finish a big fieldwork project. Then on the third year, you, first of all, get to specialize further in topics such as medical anthropology, in case of sustainability track, or just ethnography methods, such as in visual methods track. But then the important thing about the third year is that you get a whole big elective space, 30 ECTs, a whole semester, for you to shape in whichever way you want, as long as it kind of relates to anthropology. So, for instance, you can do a minor. If this is a major, like a bachelor of 3 years, many studies offer a minor, such as psychology, journalism, or international relations, which is the one that I did. And you know, that helped me a lot discover that I do not want to be a diplomat or anything like that. And it's just 6 months. So it's an incredible way to get also a bit of background on another topic that you're interested in. There's also many other options. So for instance, doing internships at NGOs, I was able to do one in Japan for an NGO related to education. There's also exchange opportunities. We have another student that just fell in love with Turkey after her exchange there. And so many other things like the water project in the Philippines. And then, the big thing, we also have the bachelor thesis, which I'm super excited to start. Also a bit scary. So then, after all of this, you gain so many things, okay? Wow, it's incredible. So first of all, you gain thematic expertise on topics such as the key topics, diversity, digitalization, sustainability, but also different concepts that, for instance, I didn't know about before, such as power relations. You also become an independent researcher and a solid analytic writer because, as mentioned, we really get to put into use our skills of fieldwork, our skills of research. And then, of course, because of that, you get trained in asking questions, in selecting research methods, and producing knowledge that is useful to society. So it's not really just observing from far away and keeping the knowledge to yourself, but interacting with people. And then, you know, what you learn, try to put it to action. Try to make people's situations better. And then my favorite one, by far, is that you learn to look critically at the way people behave and why. And this is amazing because it just changes your whole life. For instance, I always compare myself to perhaps friends that study medicine, and you know, they become doctors, as if they get like a tool. Imagine they get like a screwdriver that helps them in specific situations, like when you're doing an IKEA bed, but then you cannot use it for many other things. It's still useful, you know, a doctor friend being able to heal you when you have a cut in your arm. But to me, anthropology, it's as if you get glasses, which help you in everything because it just changes how well you can look at reality all the time. And so, because we study people and we become so much more critical about it, this just changes everything because there's people everywhere. And so I've seen how this has changed my interactions with my family, with my close friends, with the world so much, and with myself, just noticing stuff that I'm assuming or starting to be more critical of what I believe in and all these different things. But most importantly, what we get from doing all this field work and really opening our minds so much, we start to reach out more to try to understand what other people want, what other people believe outside of our brains. So this is incredible, but also you get to learn to work in complex situations and to use a holistic approach so that all these critical thinking and everything, again, is not just kept for yourself, but brought out into the world that really needs it. Then about the admission requirements, to see if this can fit your schedule for your life. So for Dutch students, just a Dutch pre-university education diploma, so a VWO for instance, is needed to study. Or you can have an international equivalent, which you can find on the website. You can also perhaps enter the studies with a propedeutic diploma of having started another university studies. And you can check out other options in the website. So for instance, if you're studying HABO. Something else that you need is English proficiency. So for example, proved with a test. And that's basically it. So those two things. But you should know that if you don't exactly meet those requirements, you can still maybe try. You can still contact our study advisor because, for instance, I didn't meet all the requirements for the Spanish students. So with a lot of effort, maybe you can also get in. So then, after you finish the studies, what are the options? There's so many more that you can imagine. So first of all, you can continue your studies. We offer 3 different masters in our institute, which are the Global Ethnography Master, where you get to construct your own research, choose your own location, and actually do it. You have the Policy and Practice Master, where you develop different policies for, trying to help actors such as NGOs help better society and act upon different challenges. And then you have the Visual Ethnography Masters, which is one of the specializations of our institute, as it's focused on filmmaking and documentary making. But there's many other masters that you can get into with this bachelor, usually in Leiden and The Hague and many other universities in the Netherlands. From, for instance, social sciences and humanities, there's so many options that you have, but probably maybe even more. About the different job opportunities after this, there's so many, but I'm just going to focus a bit on policy and management and development work, because I see that most of my friends, or for instance me with my internships, we get into a lot of NGOs with development work, but there's also a friend of mine that was in the Policy and Practice Masters. He was doing some internship and helping with policies in a port, and then now he liked it so much, they liked him so much, that he ended up just working in change management there, and he's been there for over a year. Our skills that we get as anthropologists are highly valued everywhere because we get to understand better people. So to conclude, is CADS the right program for you? Well, in this program, we usually find people that are curious, open-minded, engaged, and adventurous. But this doesn't mean that you have to, get out there from the beginning and do a lot of stuff. It's fine. We also have a lot of introverts. But just as long as you're interested in people, as long as you really want to learn, that's just the key. So if you want to learn more about this program, you can also listen to the stories of so many other students. You can come to the open days, you can come to the experience days, you can become a student for a day if you contact our student ambassador, or just have a call with them. There's so many things that you can do, so you can find more about them in our website. So after all of this, and listening to me for so long, thank you. Thank you so much. And we really wish you the best of luck with finding what study is best for you. And we will be waiting for you at Leiden University if you decide to come. Thank you.